The Keynote by Anna's Stories. For every woman who has ever been asked in 100 small ways to go somewhere else. Part 1. The Weight of a Name. Chapter 1. What She Carries. The morning flight from LaGuardia to O'Hare was 43 minutes late, which meant Serena Baptiste arrived at the Midway Grand Convention Center with less time than she liked, more coffee than was wise, and the particular kind of stillness that people who did not know her sometimes mistook for indifference. She was not indifferent. She was simply accustomed to arriving. Her carry-on was a soft-sided Italian leather bag the color of dark honey, packed the way her grandmother, Miss Eunice, had taught her to pack anything that mattered, everything in its right place, nothing wasted, enough room left over for what you could not have predicted. Her laptop was in the front pocket, the Keynote notes she no longer needed because she had long since memorized them tucked behind it anyway, a habit she couldn't break. She had a habit of over-preparation the way some people had a habit of prayer. The two were not unrelated. She was wearing a deep burgundy wrap dress, silk-wool blend tailored, and low-heeled black pumps that she could stand in for 4 hours without complaint. Her hair was natural, a dense crown of tight coils she had stopped pressing straight sometime in her late 30s and had not missed once. She wore small gold hoops and a watch her mentor, Dr. Claudette Joseph, had given her when her first book was published, which said simply, in engraved letters inside the clasp, "You were always ready." She had been on a plane 2 of the last 4 days, before that Austin, before that London. The Apex Leadership Summit in Chicago was the last engagement of the fiscal quarter, and then she was going home, not to her apartment in Washington, D.C., but home, to Antigua, to Fitch's Creek, to Miss Eunice. She stepped out of the cab and looked up at the Midway Grand. 40 stories of glass and steel, banners running the full height of the building's face. Apex Leadership Summit. The future of business begins here. A red carpet at the main entrance, not metaphorically but literally. A red carpet, stanchions, photographers from industry publications, a cluster of men in suits moving like schools of fish, purposeful and identical. She counted the Apex banners, 12. She counted the corporate sponsor logos, 7 Fortune 500 companies, 2 investment banks, 1 tech conglomerate she had advised twice, and a pharmaceutical group whose leadership retreat she had run the previous fall. She counted these things not out of vanity, but out of the same instinct that had kept her alive in rooms like this for 20 years. Know where you are, know what it costs, know what you're walking into. Serena Baptiste was 47 years old. She had written 3 books: The Architecture of Trust, a Wall Street Journal bestseller for 16 months, Leading While Seen, which had appeared on the cover of both Harvard Business Review and Essence in the same week, and her most recent, The Economics of Inclusion, which had sold 400,000 copies in hardback and been translated into 11 languages. She ran Baptiste Group, a leadership consulting firm with offices in Washington, New York, and London, employing 22 full-time staff. She had been on the covers of Forbes, Fast Company, and Black Enterprise. The closing keynote slot at the Apex Leadership Summit, 3,000 attendees, Fortune 500 sponsors, live streamed to an audience the organizers projected at 200,000, was not the largest audience she had ever addressed, but it was the most prestigious business conference in North America, and the closing keynote was its crown. Her fee was $150,000 per keynote appearance, and the Apex conference had paid it without negotiation. She pulled the handle of her carry-on and walked toward the main entrance, and the morning sun came off the glass face of the Midway Grand in long, flat sheets of light that reminded her, briefly, of something else, of another morning, a long time ago, in a different kind of light. The light in Fitch's Creek, Antigua, was nothing like Chicago light. Chicago light was industrial, purposeful, specific. It came in angles and found hard surfaces and bounced. The light in Fitch's Creek came down soft as a hand on a shoulder. It arrived early. This Serena remembered most, the way the light came before the heat, how she used to wake in the small blue bedroom at the back of Miss Eunice's house and see the whole sky shift from gray-purple to rose-gold through the louvered shutters, the light coming in stripes across the concrete floor. The smell before the light even fully arrived, sea salt and wood smoke and something green, something living. The perfume of the breadfruit tree in the yard mixing with whatever Miss Eunice was already warming on the stove. She must have been 7 or 8 or 9. The age blurred, the memory stayed precise. The sound of the sea from Fitch's Creek Bay was never loud, never the crashing drama of the Atlantic coast. It was a low, continuous conversation, the water against the mangroves, the whisper of it pulling back across sand and stone. You stopped noticing it the way you stopped noticing the sound of your own breathing, and then one day you went somewhere that had no sea and the silence was deafening. Serena had spent her first winter in Boston at 18 on a scholarship to Northeastern University and had lain awake for weeks in a dormitory room in November, unable to identify what was wrong. It had taken her until December to understand. No sea. No water anywhere near enough to hear. She had taken the tea to Revere Beach on a Tuesday morning with her coat too thin for the wind, and stood at the edge of that gray Atlantic water with her shoes filling with wet sand, and felt something loosen in her chest that had been clenched since August. She did not call it homesickness at the time. She called it nothing. She simply stood at the edge of the water and let the cold wind come, and thought of Miss Eunice, and thought, I have done harder things than this. Had she at 18? She wasn't sure, but she had believed it, and belief had turned out to be enough. Chapter 2. Miss Eunice. Her grandmother's full name was Eunice Adele Baptiste, née Freeland, born in 1944, in the village of Pares in the parish of St. Philip. Moved to Fitch's Creek at 22 when she married Serena's grandfather, Clifton, a mason who built half the concrete houses in the neighborhood before his heart gave out at 59. Miss Eunice had not, to Serena's knowledge, ever raised her voice in anger. She had not needed to. She had a way of going quiet that was louder than any shout. When Serena was accepted to Northeastern, a full scholarship, the first person from Fitch's Creek to win one, the first person in her family to attend university outside the Caribbean, Miss Eunice had sat down at the kitchen table with the acceptance letter, read it twice, and then folded it with great care along its original creases and returned it to its envelope. She had looked at Serena for a long moment. You going go? She had said. Yes, Grandma. Another pause. The sea outside going about its business. Good, Miss Eunice had said. And that had been that. No ceremony, no weeping, no speeches. Just good, the way you might say good about a pot that had finally come to proper boil. Measured, satisfied, inevitable. What she had said later, the night before Serena left for V.C. Bird International Airport, was the thing Serena had carried ever since, the thing she carried still, folded small and kept somewhere under the sternum, them going, look at you and see the thing they expect to see. You let them, and then you show them something else entirely. Serena had thought at 18 that this was advice about being black in America, which it was. She had come to understand at 25 and 35 and 47 that it was advice about something larger, about the gap between what the world projects onto you and what you actually are, and how to inhabit that gap with patience and precision, and when the moment finally comes, with devastating clarity. Miss Eunice had given her 2 other things. A bottle of Cavalier rum wrapped in a cloth to give to her dormitory housemates as a gift from Antigua, and a small framed photograph of Fitch's Creek Bay taken from the hill behind the church, the water showing turquoise against the mangroves, so dark a green they were almost black. Serena still had the photograph. It sat on the corner of her desk in Washington, and had sat on every desk she had ever occupied, in Boston, in New York, in London, in Johannesburg. She had brought it to her first speaking engagement, at a conference of 300 people in a hotel ballroom in Baltimore, when she was 31 and terrified, and had given what she still considered the worst keynote speech of her life. Too fast, too academic, the humor landing wrong, the ending fumbled. She had come off stage to polite applause, and sat in the nearest chair and held the photograph in both hands, and thought of the water and of Miss Eunice's voice, and of the feeling of being 7 years old and waking to that light. The second speech had been better. By the 10th speech she had found it. By the 50th she understood that what she had found was not a performance. It was simply herself, uncovered. It had taken 31 years and 50 speeches to understand that the person she actually was, without armor or accommodation, was exactly who needed to be in the room. Chapter 3. The Midway Grand. The convention center's lobby was a cathedral of corporate ambition. Three-story atrium, glass ceiling through which the October sky showed gray and purposeful, registration tables running in long rows beneath Apex Leadership Summit banners, volunteers in blue lanyards moving briskly, the particular energy of several thousand professionals who had flown in from all over the country and were performing their best version of themselves. Serena stepped through the revolving glass door, pulled her carry-on and looked around. To her left, the general attendee registration, lines already forming at 9:15 a.m., people queued in zigzag rows with their phones out, the familiar patience of conference goers. To her right, the VIP speakers registration table, a shorter line, white tablecloths, 2 people staffing it. Ahead, past the atrium, the corridor that led toward the main hall and the backstage access, which she would need by 6:45 p.m. for the evening's program. She was 7 hours early. She liked 7 hours early. It gave her time to walk the main stage. She always walked a stage before she stood on it, understood the distance from the lip to the first row, the angle of the lights, the height of the ceiling. It gave her time to sit in the green room and read through her notes one final time, even though she did not need them. It gave her time, most importantly, to become comfortable inside the building, so that when she finally walked out, she was not arriving, she was already there. She had emailed Yolanda Harris, the Apex Summit's director, 3 days ago to confirm arrival time and request green room access from 5 p.m. Yolanda had replied within the hour, "We are so thrilled to have you. I'll leave a badge at the very important person desk and alert backstage that you'll be coming early to do a stage walk. Everything is arranged." Everything was arranged. Serena adjusted the strap of her laptop bag, took one breath, the breath that was not a preparation but a return, a coming back to herself, and walked toward the side corridor that connected to the registration area. She did not know yet what the next 8 hours were going to cost her. Part 2, 3 times. Chapter 4, the chairs. She had not intended to come in through the service corridor. Her hotel, the Ambassador, was connected to the Midway Grand by a sky bridge that led out on the convention center side through a short interior passage that ran alongside the loading dock area. She had taken the sky bridge, the easiest route from her room, and come out through that passage into a wide, utility-lit corridor that smelled of fresh paint and coffee, which told her she was close to the catering staging area. The catering company's trucks were visible through the open loading bay doors, and several servers in white shirts and black trousers were unloading stacked chairs from a trolley, their blue Midway Grand ID lanyards swinging as they worked. She was moving through the corridor toward the main lobby when a young man in a blue Apex lanyard and a headset stepped in front of her. Early 20s, blonde hair, the earnest energy of a volunteer who had been given responsibility and was going to execute it precisely. "Hey, are you with Coastal Catering?" he said, not rudely, pleasantly, in fact, with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone running through a checklist. Serena stopped. She looked at him, looked at his lanyard, which identified him as Brad, volunteer coordinator, looked at the clipboard in his hand, looked at the stacked chairs by the loading bay. "No," she said, "I'm not." Something moved across his face, a small recalibration, not quite convincing. "Oh, I'm sorry, we're waiting on some extra chairs from storage for the main hall," and he gestured at the corridor, at her tote bag, at the general direction she had come from. She understood the geometry of it. She had come from the direction of the service corridor. She was black. She was carrying a tote bag. She was not wearing a lanyard. The math for him was automatic catering staff, therefore ask about the chairs. "I'm a speaker," she said, simply, not coldly, the way you might state a fact to someone who had asked whether it was raining when clearly it was not. "Oh, okay." He stepped back. He was already looking past her, already moving on to the next item on the checklist, the recalibration incomplete. She had not quite become fully real to him. She could see it. The image in his mind, catering staff, was slow to dissolve. It sat there like a watermark on paper, the original impression showing through. "Have a great day," she said, and walked on. She walked through the corridor at the same pace she had been walking before, unhurried, deliberate. She rounded the corner into the main lobby, and the atrium opened above her, and the noise of several thousand professionals going about their morning business rose up around her, and she stood there for a moment, simply standing. Them going to look at you and see the thing they expect to see. She had been in rooms where it happened in subtler ways. A boardroom in London where the assistant had asked if she was there to take the lunch order. A medical conference in Atlanta where someone had handed her a patient's chart. A law firm in Seattle where the partner had thanked her for bringing the coffee she was not carrying. She had learned to receive each of these moments like a stone dropped in still water. She let it drop, watched the rings spread outward, watched them go still again. She did not chase the rings. She was the water. But she noted them. She always noted them. They were data, she had told audiences in speeches and workshops, and once in a Senate hearing room when she was called to testify on corporate diversity practices. Each of these moments is data. Data about what the room expects, data about the distance between expectation and reality, data that should be driving your business decisions and is not. She let herself into the closest restroom, ran cold water over her wrists, looked at herself in the mirror for exactly 3 seconds, not a pep talk, not a mantra, just the act of seeing herself, being seen, even if only by herself, and then walked out toward the very important person registration table. Chapter 5, Donna. The VIP speaker's registration table was staffed by a woman in her early 50s with a silver bob and reading glasses pushed up on her head, wearing a headset and an Apex lanyard that read Donna Walsh, VIP Registration Manager. She was efficient and pleasant. She had the practiced warmth of someone who managed lists for a living and took pride in the smoothness of the operation. Serena approached and said her name clearly. Serena Baptiste. I'm the closing keynote speaker. Donna smiled and turned to her laptop screen. She typed, scrolled, frowned at the screen with the focused expression of someone who had found a discrepancy and was confident it belonged to the other party. She typed again. Baptiste? B-A-P-T-I-S-T-E, Serena said. Yes. More scrolling. Donna's expression had not changed, but something had shifted behind it. The frown was now pointed slightly inward toward herself, though it had not yet become an apology. I'm looking for you in speakers. Let me just... She moved her cursor to a different tab. Are you registered as a general attendee or as... Keynote speaker, Serena said. Closing keynote this evening. Donna was in the wrong list. Serena could not see the screen, but she recognized the rhythm of someone who was looking in the right filing cabinet but the wrong drawer, and instead of pausing to open the correct drawer, was running their finger faster and faster down the wrong set of files, hoping speed would solve the problem. Serena had seen this pattern 10,000 times in organizations. It was a management problem as much as anything else, the belief that looking harder in the wrong place was preferable to stopping to ask where the right place was. I don't see you under keynote speakers, Donna said. There was the faintest inflection of verdict in her voice. Not accusation, but verdict. I wonder if there's a separate list, Serena said. Yolanda Harris arranged the badge. Yolanda is the conference director. I'm familiar with Yolanda, Donna said, with the tone of someone who is slightly tired of hearing Yolanda's name invoked. I'll need to check with the team, of course. In the meantime... She gestured toward the general registration area. If you want to queue for general admission, I can try to get you a badge from there while we verify. I'm not a general attendee, Serena said. Still pleasant, still unhurried, but she let the sentence land without softening it. I am the closing keynote speaker for this conference. My fee was paid 3 months ago. Yolanda Harris arranged a VIP badge for me to be at this table. Donna looked at her again. A look that was not hostile but was not quite open either. It was the look of someone who had constructed a narrative and was now being asked to revise it, and the revision was taking a moment. Donna's narrative had Serena in the wrong category, not by cruelty but by the gravity of assumption, the same quiet gravity that had shaped Brad's mathematics 20 minutes earlier. I'll need to verify that, Donna said. It'll just be a minute. Serena stepped to the side of the table and stood. She did not look at her phone. She did not tap her fingers. She stood and watched the VIP table process 3 other speakers in the time it took Donna to conduct her verification. A white man in his 60s with a keynote on supply chain innovation, a white woman in her 40s with a panel session on venture capital. Both of them had moved through the VIP table in under 2 minutes. Both of their badges had been in the right list. She had been waiting for 11 minutes when Donna finally found the correct tab, the separate keynote speakers list, which had been sorted alphabetically and therefore showed Baptiste at the top, and looked up with an expression that was partly relief and partly something that was not quite an apology. "Here you are," Donna said. "Serena Baptiste closing keynote." A pause. "The badge is all ready?" She held it out. Serena took it. The badge read Serena Baptiste, keynote speaker, Apex Leadership Summit in large, clear text. She put the lanyard around her neck. "Thank you," she said. She said it without sarcasm and without frost and without the 30 years of accumulated data behind it seeping into her voice, though they were all there. She said it simply because it was what she said. Donna's expression settled into something flustered and apologetic, but the apology did not quite arrive. "We've had a lot of," she began. "I'll need access to the backstage area and green room from 5 o'clock, Serena said. "Can you make sure that's noted?" "Absolutely," Donna said. "It's all in the system." Serena smiled, warm, professional, and walked away from the very important person table and did not look back. Chapter 6: The Cost of Small Things. She found a quiet corner of the lobby near the window wall overlooking the river, sat down in a chair with her carry-on at her feet, and opened her laptop. She ordered a coffee from the lobby cafe via the hotel app and let it arrive without ceremony. Outside, the Chicago River ran flat and gray beneath an October sky that was considering rain. She worked for 4 hours. This was not avoidance. She had genuine work, final edits to the Q3 report for a corporate client, 3 emails requiring considered responses, a call with her Washington office at 2 o'clock to go over the November calendar. She was a woman with a business to run, and the business did not stop because she had a keynote this evening. But in the smaller chambers of her attention, she was also doing something else, processing, storing. The incidents sat in her body the way all such incidents did, not as wounds exactly, but as a kind of low-frequency interference, the static you could hear under the signal if you listened for it. She had developed over 20 years a method of containment. You didn't deny the static. You didn't let it drown the signal. You noted the frequency, you labeled it, and you put it somewhere it couldn't reach the working parts of you. She thought of her friend and colleague Dr. Patricia Achimpong in London, who always said, "It is an act of discipline what we do. The grace we perform. Don't let anyone tell you it costs nothing, because it costs everything. And that's why it's an act of discipline and not of weakness." Patricia said it cheerfully, in her Ghanaian British accent, over wine at a conference in Edinburgh 3 years ago. Serena had laughed and agreed, and they had moved on to other topics. But she kept the words the way she kept useful things, stored, retrievable. The cost of small things was never small. The checkout counter incident at a pharmacy in Midtown Manhattan, 2012. The cab that had driven past her with its light on, and then stopped for the white woman half a block behind her, 2015. The restaurant in Houston, 2019, where the hostess had said the reservation was not in the system and there had been a wait of 40 minutes, a wait that had ended immediately when Serena's white colleague had arrived and inquired. The conference in Seattle, 2017, where a senior executive had approached her after her keynote to say, with genuine admiration, that she spoke so well. The board meeting in Boston, 2020, where she had made a point, had it talked over, and watched the same point acknowledged and lauded when repeated by a white male colleague 10 minutes later. Each of these things was a stone dropped in still water. Separately, they vanished. Added together, weighted, accumulated across years and decades, they became a sediment. You carried it. The discipline was in carrying it without letting it change the quality of your attention, the warmth of your engagement, the clarity of your mind. She had not yet been to the stage. She had not yet been to the green room. The day was not finished. She drank her coffee. She edited the third quarter report. Outside, the Chicago River kept running. Part 3, the third time. Chapter 7, Marcus. At 5 o'clock exactly, Serena closed her laptop, repacked her bag, and walked toward the backstage entrance. The main hall was a cavernous room. She had checked the floor plan, with a capacity of 3,200, a stage that was elevated 6 feet from the floor, a bank of theatrical lighting that would make the stage look, from the audience, like something between a stadium concert and a TED Talk. The evening program began at 7. Keynote speakers were announced beginning at 7:30. She was the final speaker, announced last, which meant she would take the stage somewhere around 8:30 or 9. The program was a machine and she was the last gear to turn. She walked through the corridor marked backstage, production only, her badge visible on her lanyard, her carry-on behind her. She reached the door to the backstage holding area, a heavy fire door propped open with a security contractor standing beside it, white man mid-40s, broad-shouldered, compact, a black polo with an event security logo and earpiece, a badge of his own that read Marcus Hill, Event Security. He had the particular watchfulness of security professionals, the constant peripheral reading of space and entry points. He saw her coming and his expression shifted into the alert neutrality that was the professional face of his job. She reached the door. "This area is for speakers and production," he said. Not unkindly, simply. She touched her badge. "I'm a speaker, Serena Baptiste, closing Keynote." He looked at her badge. Then he looked at her. Then he looked at her badge again, and she watched his face do the thing that Brad's face had done and that Donna's face had done. The face of a man running his expectation against the available evidence and finding the two things did not yet match. "I'll need to confirm with the events team," he said. She looked at her badge, Serena Baptiste, keynote speaker, large, clearly printed. She looked at the door. She looked at Marcus. "My badge says keynote speaker," she said. Still calm, still even. She was operating from a kind of deep stillness now, the way you operated from stillness when you were very, very tired. "Yes, ma'am, I understand. It's protocol. I confirm all speakers with the events team before I can authorize backstage access. Is that standard procedure for all speakers?" She said, not belligerently, genuinely, as if noting a policy question. "It's my procedure, ma'am." She nodded once. "How long will that take?" He touched his earpiece and radioed. She heard him say, "I have someone at the backstage door, says she's the closing keynote." A pause. She did not hear the response. He nodded. "Should be just a couple minutes," he said. She stood. This was the third time. She stood outside a door she should have been through, in a building where her name was on every banner with a badge around her neck that named her clearly, and she was standing outside because 3 different people in one day had looked at her and made the same calculation, had looked at where she was expected to be and put her there, even though she was somewhere else entirely. She was not angry. She had made peace a long time ago with the fact that anger, for her, in situations like this, was a luxury that cost more than it bought. But she was tired in a way that went deeper than the flight from LaGuardia, deeper than the 4 hours of work in the lobby. She was tired with the specific weight of a woman who has been asked all her life to prove herself to rooms that have already decided what she is. And then she heard Miss Eunice's voice. Not as a hallucination, she was clear-headed, she was always clear-headed, but as memory, precise and located, the kitchen in Fitch's Creek, the smell of salt fish and thyme, the early morning light coming in through the Louvre, Miss Eunice's voice unhurried and certain. "Them going look at you and see the thing they expect to see. You let them, and then you show them something else entirely." She had shown them all her life. She would show them tonight. Chapter 8. What it costs to wait. The minutes passed. 3, 4. The corridor was lit with fluorescent work lights, and around the corner she could hear production staff moving equipment, the particular sounds of a stage being readied, a thud of something heavy, someone calling out to someone else, a microphone check cycling through frequencies. The building was alive, and she was outside it waiting to be let in. She thought about Fitch's Creek. She did this when she needed to locate herself. Not to escape the present, but to anchor it, to put this corridor in a longer story so it could not become the whole story. She thought about the year she was 12 and had won the inter-school speech competition, had stood at a microphone in the auditorium of All Saints School in St. Philip and spoken for 6 minutes about water conservation, a topic she had chosen herself because Fitch's Creek Bay was already showing the signs of coastal stress that she had read about in a library book. She had been terrified and had stood up straight and spoken clearly and won, and Miss Eunice had been in the back of the room with her face arranged in the expression that for Miss Eunice constituted ecstasy, very slightly less than her normal expression of composed satisfaction. She thought about her first book, submitted to publishers 19 times before it was accepted, 19 form rejections, some of which had been polite enough to note that there was limited commercial market for the subject, a phrase she had kept and returned to, savoring it the way you might savor something bitter that later proved medicinal. She thought about the morning she had stood in a Barnes & Noble in Georgetown and seen it on the new business arrivals table, and had stood there so long without picking it up that a bookseller had approached and asked if she needed help. Need help. The phrase was funny. She had laughed. The bookseller had looked at her strangely, and she had said, "I'm the author," and the bookseller had said, "Oh my God, wait right here," and run to get a marker for Serena to sign the display copy, and that had been a good moment. A very good moment. She thought about the Forbes cover, 38 years old, which made her one of the youngest women ever on a Forbes Power issue. The photographer had said, "Give me something fierce," and she had thought, "I am not fierce, I am simply present," and she had been simply present, and the photograph had been mistaken for fierce by many people, and she had long since stopped correcting them. 7 minutes now she was still standing. Marcus had radioed twice. The second time his voice had carried a note of something, not quite apology, but the discomfort of a man who was beginning to understand that the protocol he had invoked was revealing something about itself. He stood beside the door, his posture correct, his expression neutral. She did not make eye contact. She looked at the floor plan that she had pulled up on her phone, studying the stage dimensions and the speaker's entrance position, using the time the way Miss Eunice had always used whatever time she had, productively, without drama. And then she heard her name. Serena. Serena Baptiste. She turned. Chapter 9. Yolanda. Yolanda Harris was 44 years old, the director of the Apex Leadership Summit since its 4th year, the woman who had built it from a mid-tier regional conference into the most prestigious business leadership event in North America. She was 5'4" and moved like someone who needed to be in 3 places and had decided to be in all of them at once. She was wearing a black blazer with a headset, holding a tablet, and her expression when she rounded the corridor and saw Serena Baptiste standing outside the backstage door was one of the most complex expressions Serena had seen in some time. Relief and horror, and something that looked very much like recognition, as if she had been told to watch for this possibility and had failed to head it off. "Serena, I am so sorry." She was moving toward her already, one hand out. "I have been looking for you everywhere. I called the hotel and then Is your phone on silent? I've been..." She stopped and looked at Marcus, who was standing with the door handle, and her expression shifted. "Open the door," she said, quietly, precisely. Marcus opened the door. "Thank you," Yolanda said in a tone that thanked him for the right thing and told him the rest of it would be addressed later. She took Serena's arm and walked her through into the backstage area. "How long were you standing out there?" Yolanda said. "Not long," Serena said. "How long, Serena?" A pause. 8 minutes, maybe 9. Yolanda closed her eyes briefly. "And before that?" Serena let a moment pass. "It's been a full day," she said. "Tell me." Serena told her, briefly, factually, without affect, the corridor and Brad, the very important person table and Donna, the backstage door and Marcus. Yolanda listened, and her face moved through a series of controlled expressions, the way a skilled pianist moves through a difficult passage, noting each note without allowing them to collapse into noise. "I need you to let me handle this," Yolanda said. "After tonight, all of it. I need to make that right." "You don't have to." "I do," Yolanda said. "You are the closing keynote of my conference. You have been treated 3 times today as though you were not supposed to be here. That is not acceptable, and I am going to address it, and the reason I am going to address it is not just because you are the closing keynote, but because it is not acceptable for anyone to be treated that way. Are you okay? Are you steady?" Serena looked at her, looked at this woman who was running the largest business conference in North America, and had just run down a service corridor at 5 past 5 in the afternoon, and had said it is not acceptable for anyone with the ring of a woman who meant it. "I'm steady," Serena said. "Good," Yolanda exhaled. "Because in 3.5 hours you are going to walk out on that stage, and there are going to be 3,000 people in that room, and I need..." She stopped, changed course. "I want to show you the stage." Part 4, The Call. Chapter 10, Before the Stage. The main stage at the Midway Grand was, up close, a different creature than it appeared in photographs. It was wider than it looked, 40 feet across, Serena estimated, measuring it the way she always measured stages, in paces. It was elevated exactly right, high enough to command the room, not so high as to create distance. The screen behind the stage was enormous. She had not brought slides, had never used slides in a keynote. She found they interrupted the thing she was trying to do, which was speak to people not present to them. And it showed on its dark face the Apex Leadership Summit logo in anticipation. She walked the stage alone. Yolanda waited in the wings, checking her tablet. The lights were at working brightness, not performance lighting, which would transform everything later. And so the stage was lit practically, the seats of the main hall stretching out before her in dim rows, 3,000 empty chairs. She stood at center stage and looked out at the empty room. 3,000 chairs. She had spoken in rooms like this before, but there was always this moment. The room empty, the scale visible, the distance between where she was standing and where the people would be, when it became briefly abstract. A thought experiment, an equation she was about to solve. She had always preferred rooms with people in them, truth be told. The chairs, empty, were potential. The people were the thing. She walked back into the wings at 6:15, and Yolanda met her with the news that the green room was ready, and that dinner, a proper dinner delivered from the hotel kitchen, not a conference catering tray, would arrive at 6:45. "You have until 8, Yolanda said. "Then I'll come get you myself." Serena sat in the green room. A real green room, this one. A comfortable chair, a full-length mirror, good lighting, a small refrigerator, the smell of fresh flowers someone had thought to put in a vase. And she opened her phone. She called Antigua. Chapter 11. The Voice from Fitch's Creek. The phone rang 3 times, which meant Miss Eunice was not in the kitchen, was probably in the garden, and was walking back toward the house to answer it with the deliberateness of a woman who did not run for telephones because telephones were not emergencies. "Hello?" The voice, 81 years old now, somewhat lower than it had been, but with the same quality of unhurried attention, the same faint Antiguan cadence that Serena still heard unconsciously as the sound of home. "Grandma. It's me, Serena." Acetling. She was sitting down, Serena knew, in the chair by the window that looked out over the yard, and beyond the yard, the slant of water visible between the houses. "You call me late today." "I know. I'm in Chicago." "How's Chicago?" "Cold," Serena said. "Flat, gray sky." Miss Eunice absorbed this with characteristic equanimity. "You eat?" "I'm about to." "What they feeding you?" "Hotel food. It'll be fine." "Hotel food," Miss Eunice said, with the mild disdain she reserved for food not prepared in a proper kitchen. "You need fungi, that's what you need." Serena laughed, a real laugh, the first unguarded thing she had done all day, the laugh of being known. "I'm not going to find fungi in Chicago, Grandma." "I know that. I'm saying what you need, not what you go and get." A pause. "How the talk going?" "I haven't done it yet. Tonight, 8 o'clock. "How many people?" 3,000 there, 200,000 watching on the internet. Silence. Not the silence of incomprehension. Miss Eunice was perfectly capable of understanding large numbers, but the silence of a woman measuring something. Then, "You ready?" "Yes." "You always ready," Miss Eunice said, simply, the way she always said it. The same words from the watch, from the woman who had given the watch's sentiment before the watch existed. "You've been ready since you were this small." And Serena could feel the gesture through the phone, Miss Eunice's hand held low, the height of a small child. "You remember you used to stand on the step outside and practice your speech? For the school competition, talking to the yard." "I remember." "Talking to the chickens," Miss Eunice said. "Those chickens heard every speech you ever gave before anyone else did." "And they were a very demanding audience." "They were stupid chickens," Miss Eunice said pleasantly. "But you treated them like they were wise. That's why you're good at what you do." Serena sat in the green room with her phone at her ear and the full-length mirror showing her. The burgundy dress, the natural hair, the gold watch, the woman she had become in the years since the step and the chickens and the Antiguan light coming through louvered shutters, and felt for a moment the 2 versions of herself occupy the same room. The girl who had practiced on the step, and the woman who was about to walk onto a stage in front of 3,000 people. They were, she understood, not different people at all. Something happened today, she said. Tell me. She told Miss Eunice not everything, not the details she had given Yolanda, the clinical accounting. She told it the way you told things to your grandmother, the shape of it, the weight. 3 times today, she said, 3 different people. And Miss Eunice listened with the silence she had always had, the silence that was not passive but active, that said, I am hearing all of it, including what you are not saying. Miss Eunice said when she had finished. Just that, And what you going do? I'm going to give the best speech I've ever given, Serena said. Yes, Miss Eunice said. You are, not as encouragement, as fact. A pause. The sound of something, a bird, or the wind through the breadfruit tree. Serena couldn't be sure, but something alive and outdoor coming through the phone from 3,000 miles and 1 ocean away. Grandma, do you remember what you said to me the night before I left? The thing about what people expect to see? I remember. I've been thinking about it all day. I know, Miss Eunice said. You've been thinking about it for 30 years. Another pause. You're going to show them something else tonight, something they go and carry home. You hear me? I hear you. Good. Eat your dinner. Stand up straight. Remember where you come from. A beat. And call me after. Don't matter how late. I will. I love you, child. I love you too, Grandma. The call ended. Serena sat for a moment with the phone in her hand and the green room quiet around her, and let the silence from that conversation settle over her like a second skin. Then she put the phone down, straightened her dress, and looked at herself in the mirror. She was ready. She had been ready since the step. Part 5, the stage. Chapter 12, 8:30. The dinner arrived. She ate it properly. She had learned over years never to go on a stage hungry. The body betrayed you in small ways when it wanted food. Hotel chicken was hotel chicken, but it was protein and carbohydrate, and it would hold her. At 7:30, she heard the main program begin, the audio from the hall patched through backstage monitors, a distant roar of applause as the MC took the stage, the energy of 3,000 people who had been waiting. She listened with half her attention, the other half writing, not the speech. She did not write the speech. She thought it through, which was different. Running through the opening in her mind, the structure she had decided on in the last hour. It was a different structure from what she had planned 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago she had planned to open with a story from her years in Washington. Tonight she was going to open with today. Yolanda appeared at 8:10. We're running slightly ahead, she said. You're on at 8:25. Good, Serena said. Are you? I'm ready. Yolanda studied her for a moment and seemed to find what she needed. When you walk out, she said, the room is going to be on its feet before you get to the mic. I want you to know that. It happens with every keynote, but this one, there's been a buzz all day about your new book, and 2 of the panelists earlier mentioned you by name. The room knows you're coming. Serena nodded. And Serena, I want to say something. Yolanda paused, choosing. What happened today was wrong. All 3 incidents were wrong, and I know that what I say right now doesn't undo it, and I know that you've had a version of this day in various forms many times before, and I know that I can't fix that. What I can tell you is that my conference, is going to reckon with this tonight, and publicly. She met Serena's eyes. I've already been in contact with the communications director. Yolanda, Serena said. Thank you, I mean that. Let's get you to the wing, Yolanda said. Chapter 13. The Walkout. The MC, a seasoned presenter named Devon Charles, whom Serena had met once before at an industry event, was building toward the introduction. She could hear him from the wing, his voice amplified to fill the room. Her 3rd book, The Economics of Inclusion, has been described by The Economist as the most important business book of the decade. She has advised Fortune 100 companies, testified before the United States Senate, and is the only person in the history of this conference to be asked to close 2 consecutive years, and to have accepted. She is the founder and CEO of Baptiste Group. She has been on the cover of Forbes, Fast Company, and more publications than I have time to name. She is the reason, if you ask me, that this conference closes on a Friday evening and not a Thursday afternoon, because people buy an extra night's hotel specifically to be in this room for this speech. A beat. Laughter from the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the Apex Leadership Summit stage, Dr. Serena Baptiste. The roar was immediate, not polite applause. A standing ovation before she had taken a single step. She could feel it in the floor, the vibration of 3,000 people getting to their feet. Yolanda put a hand briefly on her arm. Go. She walked out. The light hit her and the room appeared and she was in it. She had done this hundreds of times and it never stopped being something. The transformation of energy in a room when a speaker walks out who the room trusts. You felt it like a change in weather, a shift in pressure, the air becoming warmer and more alive. She walked to the mic with the walk she always walked. Unhurried, deliberate, the same quality of presence she had carried through the service corridor and past the very important person table and through all the hours of this day. She arrived at the mic and the applause was still going and she stood and looked out at the room and she smiled. The room had 3,000 people in it. She looked at the front row. Brad was there, wearing his volunteer lanyard, now seated, pale-faced, the recognition on his face arriving like a slow tide. Donna was there, the silver bob, the reading glasses now on her nose, a conference program in her hand that had gone still. Marcus was there, standing at the side of the hall, positioned near the front, his earpiece in, his expression correct and professional. She could not read his face clearly, but she saw the moment he placed her. She let the applause finish. She did not begin over it. She waited, and the waiting itself said something to the room. I am in no hurry. I have been waiting all day. A few more seconds are nothing. When the room was quiet, she spoke. Chapter 14, the Keynote. Thank you, she said. Thank you very much. Please sit down. A rustle of settling. 3,000 people sitting. I want to tell you something that happened to me today, she said, right here in this building. The room settled into a different kind of quiet. The attentive quiet, the kind that meant something is coming. I arrived this morning at 9:15 through a side corridor, the one that connects from the Ambassador Hotel, and in that corridor a young man in a blue lanyard stopped me and asked if I was with the catering company. He needed chairs moved. She paused. Let that land. He was not unkind about it. He was perfectly pleasant. He needed chairs. He looked at me. I was black. I had a bag. I came from the direction of the service entrance, and the equation resolved for him in a particular direction. I told him I wasn't catering staff. He moved on, and I moved on. Another pause. An hour later, I came to the VIP speaker's registration table. I gave my name. I was sent to the general registration line, the long one around the corner, while it was verified that I was actually who I said I was. I waited 11 minutes. Several other speakers moved through the VIP table in under 2 minutes. She let a beat pass. Their names, presumably, did not require verification. The room was so quiet she could hear the HVAC system. And at 5 o'clock, I came to the backstage entrance with my badge. A badge that says clearly in large print, Keynote Speaker. I was stopped. I was told it was protocol. I was asked to wait while the events team confirmed that I was, in fact, a speaker at the conference where my face is on the poster outside the main doors. She could feel the room, not anger, something more complex than anger, the discomfort of recognition. She had spoken to enough rooms to know the particular texture of an audience that is recognizing itself. Now, she said, I want to be very careful here. She leaned slightly forward on the mic stand, the way she did when she was about to make the turn. None of these people were malicious, I want to say that clearly. They were not bad people acting badly. They were people acting on pattern, on expectation, on assumption, on a set of learned associations between appearance and role that they had absorbed from the world around them and had not yet been asked to examine. The young man saw a service entrance and a black woman, and his brain completed the sentence. The registration manager saw a black woman and a very important person table, and her brain hesitated at the mismatch. The security contractor saw a badge that said what I was, and still could not quite reconcile it with what he expected to see. None of this required malice. It required something more pervasive, and in some ways more dangerous than malice. It required ordinary assumption, The kind of assumption that runs quietly in the background of most organizations, most rooms, most institutions, invisible to most people in those organizations, rooms, and institutions, visible very clearly to the people it targets. She stood up straight. Here is the business case. I have been doing leadership and inclusion consulting for 18 years. I have worked inside 263 organizations across 34 countries. I have sat in boardrooms and factory floors and hospital wards and tech campuses and financial institutions and seen with my own eyes the cost of what I experience today. Not to the individual, to the organization. Because when that young man asked me about the chairs, he did not say, "You must be the brilliant person I've been reading about in Forbes. Welcome." When that registration manager sent me to the wrong line, the conference didn't say, "We are so glad the person who will close our event has arrived." When that security guard held me at the backstage door, the Apex Leadership Summit did not protect its most significant asset of the evening. The keynote speaker was standing in a fluorescent lit corridor for 9 minutes when she should have been preparing in her green room. This is not a social justice argument. This is an operations argument. If your systems cannot correctly identify and route a keynote speaker because of a set of assumptions about race and role, then your systems have a problem that extends far beyond keynote speakers. Every time a talented professional is redirected to the wrong lane, is sent to the long queue, is asked to verify what is already verified, is held at the door that should already be open, your organization loses something: time, productivity, creativity, engagement, loyalty. Every time someone's first day at a new job involves 3 interactions that say, in different ways, "We didn't expect you here," that organization is burning capital it doesn't know it's spending. The research is consistent. I review it regularly because I write about it. You may have read The Economics of Inclusion, which I am told is being sold in the lobby at a very reasonable price. A ripple of laughter, and she let it come and settle. And what the research tells us consistently across 20 years of workplace studies is this: the cost of exclusion is quantifiable, not approximately, not in sentiment and feeling and soft metrics, quantifiable in attrition, in innovation deficit, in the talent pipeline you never built, in the partnerships you never formed because the person with the most relevant expertise was standing at a door that should have been open. I stood at 3 doors today that should have been open. I am here because the doors opened, because someone, several people, ultimately got the doors open. But I want you to think about who is not here. Not tonight, not at your conferences, not in your boardrooms, not in your labs and studios and operating rooms and trading floors. Think about who has stood at 3 doors in one day and decided, reasonably, rationally, with full self-preservation intact, that the cost of continuing to stand at doors was simply too high. Who has taken their extraordinary talent and their irreplaceable expertise and their brilliant, category-defining ideas and put them somewhere else, somewhere that opened the first door. That talent did not disappear. It went somewhere. And the question you need to ask yourself, the question I ask every organization I work with is, did it go somewhere you can benefit from? Or did it go to your competitors, your disruptors, the company in the industry next door that will be building the thing you should have built? The economics of inclusion are not complicated. You do not need a diversity strategy. You need a clarity strategy. You need to be clear, you specifically, each of you, about what signals your systems send to the people in them. What messages do your doors send? What does your registration process say about who you expect to arrive? What does your onboarding tell new employees about whether they are truly welcome or merely admitted? These are operational questions. They have operational answers. But let me tell you the deeper question, the one I come back to at the end of every client engagement and every workshop and every conversation like this one. Would any of what I experienced today be acceptable for anyone? Would you ask a white male keynote speaker to bring chairs from storage? Would you send a white male panel speaker to the general registration line? Would you hold a white male closing keynote speaker outside the backstage door for 9 minutes? Would you ask him, with his badge clearly visible, his name on the poster, his face on the program, to wait while you confirmed he was who he said he was? The answer is no. You know it is no. And if the answer is no for one person, it must be no for all people. That is the floor. That is not the ceiling, not the aspiration, not the stretch goal. That is the floor of basic operational dignity, the floor of a functioning organization. Because here is what I know after 47 years of being me in rooms like this one. Your assumptions are your blind spots. Your blind spots are your vulnerabilities. And your vulnerabilities are the places where excellent people are deciding quietly in their own time that the cost of your doors is more than they are willing to pay. I am the closing keynote of this conference. You knew it when you flew to Chicago and checked into your hotel and looked at the conference program. Some people in this building knew it all day and still could not see it when I was standing right in front of them. That is not a question of intelligence. It is a question of attention, of what we have trained ourselves to see, of which expectations have been so normalized that we mistake them for reality. The good news, and there is good news, there is always good news in an economics argument, and this is an economics argument, is that attention is trainable, systems are rewritable, expectations are not permanent fixtures, they are learned, and what is learned can be unlearned, and what is unlearned can be replaced with something better. What I want you to leave here with tonight is not a feeling. I do not want you to feel guilty. Guilt is not useful to me or to you. I want you to leave here with a question. One question. Write it down if you'd like, or simply carry it. The question is this: who is standing outside a door in my organization right now? Not metaphorically, specifically. Who is waiting to be verified? Who was sent to the long queue? Who arrived with their badge clearly visible and is still being asked to prove they belong? Find that person. Open the door. Not because it is the right thing to do, though it is, but because the cost of leaving them standing there is a cost your organization cannot afford. I was born in Fitch's Creek, Antigua. I grew up near the sea, in a house where the light came through the shutters in the morning and my grandmother made salt fish on the stove, and I learned that you could speak to chickens as though they were wise and that the speaking itself was what made you ready for everything else. I left Antigua at 18. I built a career in this country through discipline and hard work and the particular grace of women who came before me and left the doors open on their way through. I walked through those open doors and I built more doors, and some of them I opened and some of them I am still opening. Tonight I want to ask you to open a door, not because someone impressive is standing on the other side, because someone is standing on the other side, and that is enough. Thank you. Part 6, After. Chapter 15, The Reaction. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds of the particular silence that comes after something real has been said in a room that needed to hear it. The silence of absorption, of 3,000 people processing something simultaneously. The silence of a room that has been handed something it did not know it was waiting for. And then the room stood up, not in the polite, programmatic way that conferences produce standing ovations, but all at once the way crowds stand when something actually happens. The sound of it rose and filled the hall, and the screens on either side of the stage were showing her face, which had in it no triumph and no performance, only the warmth and steadiness of a woman who had said what she meant. In the front row, Brad had gotten to his feet with everyone else, and he was clapping, and his face was very red, and he was not quite looking at the stage. He was looking at the floor in front of him with the particular expression of a young man who has understood something important about himself for the first time and is not sure what to do with the understanding. Donna had gotten to her feet, and her reading glasses had slipped down her nose, and she was applauding with the mechanical energy of someone who needed her body to do something because her mind was too occupied. Her face was working through something complex, the discomfort of self-recognition, the discomfort of having been named without being named, and beneath both of those things, Serena could see it, even from this distance, even in this light, something that might have been, given enough time and enough honesty, the beginning of something useful. Marcus at the side of the hall was standing straight, earpiece in, professional, but his applause was deliberate and full, and he was watching the stage with an expression that was not the watchful neutrality of his work, but something more open, something that looked, from a distance, like a man encountering an argument he could not find a counter to. Yolanda, in the wing, had both hands over her mouth. Serena stood at the mic and let the room be what it was, and looked out at the 3,000 people standing in the dark, and thought of the empty chairs she had looked at before the room filled, and thought, there is nothing more powerful than a room full of people who have just heard the truth. Chapter 16. What Comes After. She came off stage to Yolanda, who embraced her, not professionally but fully, the embrace of someone who is releasing something, and said nothing for a moment, and then said, "That's the best speech I've ever seen in 20 years of conference work." "Thank you," Serena said. "I need you to know I am filing a formal incident report tonight. All 3 incidents documented. I've already spoken with the HR director and the sponsorship team. This goes into the conference's equity review. I want you to know that." "I know," Serena said, "and I appreciate it." The speech is already clipping. It was live streamed. Someone in the first 20 rows put the whole thing on social media in real time. The audio, not great quality, but it's already at 12,000 views and it's been 15 minutes. A pause. By morning, it's going to be everywhere. Serena absorbed this. "Good," she said. Brad found her in the corridor backstage 15 minutes later. He was still in his volunteer coordinator lanyard, and he looked like someone who had decided to do something uncomfortable and was doing it before he talked himself out of it. He was younger than she had registered this morning, 22, maybe 23. "Dr. Baptiste," he said, I'm Brad. I was the one this morning with in the corridor." "I remember," she said. "I want to apologize." He said it clearly, without the hedging or the qualification that made apologies into non-apologies. "What I did this morning was I made an assumption, and the assumption was wrong, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry." She looked at him. He meant it. She could read the difference between a performed apology and a real one, and this was real. The flush in his face, the directness in his eyes, the fact that he had come to find her. "Thank you," she said, genuinely. She paused. "What do you do? What are you studying?" He blinked, surprised by the pivot. "Business," he said. "University of Michigan, junior year." "Good school," she said. "Read The Architecture of Trust. It'll be more useful to you than most of what they teach in the classroom." She smiled. "And remember this day. Remember the feeling right now. It's a data point. Use it." He nodded, took a breath, and said, "I will. Thank you, Dr. Baptiste." He walked away, and she watched him go with a feeling she always had when she saw a young person encounter their better self for the first time, a small, private satisfaction. Donna's apology, when it came, by email at 10 that night, was more complex. It was carefully worded, full of explanation, acknowledging the incident while hedging it with references to the volume of attendees and system errors in the database. Serena read it and replied in a single line, "Thank you for reaching out. I hope the conference considers a review of its registration processes going forward." It was not warmth. It was not coldness. It was a door left open the correct amount. Marcus's supervisor called Yolanda the next morning. The conversation was brief, professional. Marcus had been a contractor for 6 years with no prior complaints. The supervisor had spoken to him. What was said in that conversation was private. But the supervisor told Yolanda that Marcus had asked directly if he could see the conference's diversity training materials and whether Baptiste Group's onboarding workshop was available to private security contractors. Yolanda told Serena this on the phone the following day, and Serena sat with it for a moment and then said, "Tell him yes." The speech clip, a full, clean version shot by the conference's own production team, was posted to the Apex Leadership Summit social channels at 6:30 the following morning. By noon, it had 2 million views. By the following Monday, it had 14 million, and 3 major news organizations were running it. By the end of the week, it had been covered in the Times, the Post, the BBC, the Guardian, and a dozen business publications. The conference's communications director issued a formal statement acknowledging the incidents, committing to an operational review, and naming Baptiste Group as the firm retained to conduct the review. Corporate sponsors called. 2 CEOs in the front row, Men she had seen but not engaged with in the lobby, men who had been on their phones while the other panels ran, were suddenly calling her office. The November calendar which her Washington team had been working was overflowing by midweek. She received a text from Dr. Patricia Achampong in London, who had seen the clip. You told them the truth and they heard it. Not always guaranteed. Well done. She received a voicemail from her mother in St. John's, Antigua, who had seen something on Facebook and was confused about what Serena had been doing with chairs. She received a handwritten note on Apex Leadership Summit stationery from Devon Charles, the MC, who had watched the speech from the wings. I have introduced a lot of keynotes. I have never introduced anything like that. I am honored to have said your name. She folded the note and put it in her bag. She kept notes like that. They were part of the sediment too, the other kind, the kind that held you up. Epilogue, Fitch's Creek, December. The breadfruit tree in Miss Eunice's yard was heavy with fruit in December. Serena had forgotten this, or not forgotten exactly, but had let the memory grow abstract over years of Chicago Octobers and London Novembers and Washington winters. And then she came back and the tree was there, and the fruit was there, dense and green yellow. And the light came down through the leaves the way it always had, soft and specific and nowhere else on earth. She sat on the back step with a cup of Antiguan rum punch. Miss Eunice had made it without asking, the way you made things for people that they needed, and she looked at the yard and listened to the sound of the sea, which she had been hearing since childhood and would never stop hearing as home. Miss Eunice sat beside her in the other chair, the one that had been her grandmother's chair for as long as Serena could remember, the wooden one with the cushion tied on with a ribbon because the original ties had gone years ago. She was drinking her own punch, slowly, with the pleasure of a woman who had earned everything she enjoyed. They've been talking about you on the radio, Miss Eunice said, here in Antigua. I heard. Some people at All Saints, the head mistress, Mrs. Francis, the one who took over after old Mr. Brown, she sent a message asking if you would come and speak to the students. I know, I'll go. Serena looked at her grandmother. On this trip, if there's time, or in the spring. I tell her spring, Miss Eunice said. Give them something to look forward to. The sea moved. A pelican sailed over the water beyond the mangroves, banking on the thermal, unhurried. You sleeping tonight? Miss Eunice said. I think so, Serena said. I think I am. She had not been sleeping well for the month after Chicago, not from stress, but from a kind of excessive feeling. The way you sometimes couldn't sleep after something important had happened, not because you were troubled by it, but because your mind kept returning to it, turning it over, examining it from different angles the way you'd examine something rare you'd found on the beach. The speech, the room standing, Brad's young red face, Yolanda running down a corridor, Marcus asking for the diversity training materials, the weight of small things, the weight of small changes, the gap between them, and what it took to close it. She had thought about Miss Eunice's words again, you let them, and then you show them something else entirely. She had thought about this carefully in the weeks after Chicago, turning it over. The show, what the show cost, what it was for. It was not, she had decided, for the people who needed to see it. They would see it or they would not. She could not control that. It was for the rooms themselves, the empty chairs before the people filled them, the potential in a space that had not yet been confronted with its own assumptions. It was for the people who had been standing at doors. It was for the girl on the step in Fitch's Creek talking to the chickens. Every girl like that girl, every boy, every young person who had been told in 100 small ways to go somewhere else and had not believed it. The sun was moving toward the water. The light was going gold. Miss Eunice reached over and put her hand briefly on top of Serena's, a single warm press, and then withdrew it and drank her rum punch and looked at the sea. You did good, she said. Serena looked at the water, at the mangroves going dark in the evening light, at the sky above Fitch's Creek Bay, which was the particular blue of late afternoon in the Caribbean, the blue that appeared in no paint chip and no photograph and only ever existed in the actual air above an actual sea in actual December. I know, she said. She meant it simply. not with pride, but with a particular piece of a person who has done the thing she was always going to do in the way she was always going to do it, and has arrived back at the place she came from and found it unchanged and herself somehow both changed and exactly the same. The breadfruit tree moved in the trade wind. The sea went on about its business. Serena Baptiste sat on the step where she had once practiced speeches for an audience of chickens and drank her rum punch and watched the light go down over Fitch's Creek and was, for a moment, entirely at peace. Author's note. The Keynote is a work of fiction. Serena Baptiste, Baptiste Group, the Apex Leadership Summit, and all characters in this story are invented. Fitch's Creek is real, a coastal community in the parish of St. George, Antigua on the northeast side of the island, where the bay meets the mangroves. The food, the light, the sea, and the particular quality of Miss Eunice's silence are as true as imagination can make them. The three incidents Serena experiences in this story, being mistaken for catering staff, being diverted from the correct registration line, being held at a backstage door despite visible credentials, are not invented from imagination. They are assembled from documented experiences of Black professionals in corporate and conference settings, collected over years of journalism, research, and testimony. The details differ, the pattern does not. The deeper question Serena asks in her keynote, would this be acceptable for anyone, is the question at the center of every inclusion conversation that matters. Not, is this person qualified? Not, does this person deserve to be here? But, would we treat anyone this way? And if the answer is no, then we have found the floor. The floor is where we start. Miss Eunice is invented, but she is made from real women, the grandmothers and great aunts and church mothers and neighborhood anchors who have held communities together in places like Fitch's Creek, in places like all the places most of us came from, in the quiet and the sea wind and the light through the Louvre. She's made from the women who told the truth plainly and didn't need to raise their voices to be heard. She is made from love. Anna's Stories is a series for everyone who has ever been redirected to the wrong line, asked to verify what is already verified, or made to wait outside a door that should have been open. You are always ready. The door will open, and when it does, leave it open behind you. End of the keynote. Anna's Story.